All right, so increasing your honey production, it's all about kind of these 5 things, which you could combine into 4 or 3 or expand into 10. But there is number one, keep the predators out, whether that is mammals like mice and such, or is it hive beetles that Donna has, or is it mites? If you have, how sick is your hive? If is it too sick or is it not too sick? You want it in the not too sick realm because every hive is sick. It's just how sick is it? There's a good talk by Don Coates on that. Treating for those pests, increasing your bee space, adding in those supers as you need to add in the supers, giving them more space in the brood box. You might go into the brood box and find I've got like 5 frames of pollen, just heavy frames. You're looking for the honey in there. There's none because it's packed pollen. Pull some of those frames out. Give them some fresh frames so that there's room for that queen to continue to lay to create more workers. Harvest more frequently, and then plant. Did you mention plants earlier?
I did.
I think so. Yeah.
We all need
So
to plant.
put in some plants, and what kind of plants? Those clovers and dandelions and the low. No trees. That's what you need. If you need something immediately, it's going to be the low stuff because you can get, you get clover going quick. Planting a black locust or a tulip poplar, you're going to be waiting a couple of years before it starts really giving you forage for your bees. So those, the bears and the raccoons in this area. Oh, we don't have a problem with bears and raccoons. Wasn't there a black bear seen over in your neck of the woods this week?
Early Road.
Yeah, we had Warren Graham has hives out at Ridley Creek, and I think it was like 5 years ago. A bear came in and just ripped his hives down and had at it. They're obviously looking for the honey, right? They're after the larva. That's where all the good stuff is, the proteins and the fats. We lost a bunch of hives out at Cheslin to raccoons.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. They got trapped. They got ant or something. They got trapped out of there.
What are you supposed to do if you see like an alert that a distant apiary is under attack? What are you supposed to do with your hive if you're like, oh, there is a bear nearby?
Yeah. Number one, keep an eye on it, because just because the bear knocks it over and eats some of the frames, eats some of the larvae out of the frames, doesn't mean you can't put that hive back together and still have a hive that's viable. When we had
down,
put the ratchet straps on there. Maybe you want to put up electric fence. Lots of different things that you can do. Just back to the Cheslin flood that we had a few years ago, we had a hive that was strapped together, and it was about 100 yards downstream. Okay, and I found it Sunday. The flood was Thursday, and as I'm pulling the hive apart, at the very bottom of the hive, there's the marked queen still alive, and several hundred bees, workers in that hive. Did it survive? I don't think it did. I don't think it overwintered, but it certainly was alive a couple weeks later. No, I think that was all about timing.
Strap your hives. That's the best thing you do.
Yes,
Against
keep an eye on it.
Keep them tight.
Yeah. Okay. Treating for diseases. If you see nosema, you see lots of bee poop on the outside of your hives, you might have a problem. Do your mite counts, mite checks. And if you walk into a hive that was doing really well last week and you open it up and there's like a few bees in there, and what are they doing? They're just sucking all the honey out and there's nothing coming in. Well, that hive probably absconded. It probably said, I don't like you here. I don't like the rent. I don't like the beekeeper. I don't like the proprietor. It's too far to get to McDonald's or whatever, and they abscond. They go somewhere else, and that's just like a swarm. That's bad or potentially your neighbors, or the neighbor's attic, or the shed, or the, underneath the decking, or wherever they happen to set up, that could be all bad. All right, more space, but it's got to be a balanced amount of space. If you, as George mentioned, you've got this little cluster of bees down in here in the brood box, and you put 5 supers up there. Number one, they're not going to do much with it, but more importantly, you're inviting what? Hive beetles. Small hive beetles can just take over a hive when you've got too much space. You can also, lots of other bad things can happen if you you give enough or give too much space, but you try to play that balancing act. So give them a little bit more space. I harvest every week this time of year. So I'm going into my hives. I find frames that are capped, off they come. A test, I know that there are people out here in the club that pull a frame, it's totally uncapped, they shake it. If their feet aren't wet, they're pulling that frame. Which means when I say they shake it, they shake that frame, and you got if it's truly honey, it won't just shake out of the frame because it's very dense, very thick. When it's really light and it just water all over, or not water, but sugar, honey, all over the floor or all over the table or my boots, that means it's not quite honey yet. Paul, you were going to have a comment about that?
I was admitting to it.
I know Tom McKinney does that. I know that Keith Jardine does that. There's a lot of people that do it. I do it occasionally, but I do try to have quite a bit of capped honey on there first.
Do you have fully capped frames now or partially?
Partially. Yeah, I've got some that are like 70 or 80% capped.
What percentage do you then pull?
Depends on how I feel on any particular day. As I'm going through, it's like, okay, or if I've got the honey dome problem, which I ran into. Actually, I think about it. I had one of the George's Keepers hives that down in the spacer box was completely full of honey and probably 70% capped. So that honey dome was keeping the bees from going up into the top boxes. I pulled all 5 of those frames and I put drawn comb in there, and I could see the hive weight going up significantly on my brood binders.
If you're going to use the hunt, if you're going to extract and you're going to use it, or someone's going to use it right away, then you don't have to worry about fermenting, right? Fermentation only takes time, and generally a couple months. So again, it just depends on what your plan is with that honey too. Yeah.
Okay. So this is one method of extracting your honey. This is the crush and strain. This is the traditional method. You've got this honeycomb, you crush it, you have a cheesecloth, and you're collecting the honey from underneath the drippings. Yeah, it's messy. But if you're a new beekeeper and you've got a hive and you're just going to do one frame, I don't want to go find an extractor. I don't want to take the time and effort. I don't want to spend the money to buy an extractor. So why don't I just crush this honeycomb and there's the honey. I'm only looking for a couple of pounds for me. That's not a bad method. Like I said, it's a little messy, but honey cleans up. And you kind of lick your hands off and you're fine. Please don't do that if you're extracting to give to other people. So the more traditional method, or non-traditional, more common method today is I've got the honey capping knife, I've got a frame, I'm cutting the cappings off, throwing the frames into the extractor, I'm manually spinning that sucker and flipping the frames around because I can only extract on one side at a time, and because I bought the cheap extractor. Yeah, it works. Absolutely. Last few years, that's exactly what I was doing. I hand cranked them all. I had flipped every frame every time, and it works. And last year, that method, I did 550 pounds of honey. 2 years ago, it was 400 pounds of honey. This is from small amounts of hives. Like 4 or 5 hives. That's not bad. I think Paul's actually, what are you, about 125 pounds per hive?
Usually.
Yeah. So, the average in Chester County is about 35 pounds per hive.
Those guys are pulling every week, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to maximize your, as Mark said, just go in there, pull a couple frames that are mainly capped, extract them, and then the same day put those frames back in the hive, right? And they'll just keep filling them up. So if you really want to maximize your,
I like the change in flavors through the season.
yeah, and you get to see the different colors and flavors for sure.
Kind of the RQ. Yeah.
So if you're using an extractor, is there like a ton of honey that's getting like wasted that's stuck in it, or does it actually, like, I know very little about this.
It hits the sides of that stainless steel tank and it goes
And it
down
goes
and
down.
out.
So if I have one hive
Right.
and someone actually gave me a brand new extractor, so like as a gift, so.
Oh, nice.
So I'm excited to use it, but I feel like it's kind of crazy for somebody who. It's not? Okay, because I felt like that
Spatula.
seems a little too,
Spatula at the end and just let it all.
Okay, so that'll-
Yeah.
okay.
Well, you want to do it.
Can you do one frame? Like, does
Oh,
that
no.
seem?
Oh, no.
So how many frames do you do when you do that?
Depends on the size. Like this extractor here is a 3-frame,
Okay,
or actually that's a 4-frame extractor.
okay, so I have to see what I have.
Yeah. So, you work with what you got. If
Yeah.
all you have is one frame to do, crush it and
Okay.
drain it. That's going to be easier than trying. Because if you put one frame in an extractor,
It seems like ridiculous.
It'll
Yeah, okay.
it'll be on its side.
Okay. That's what I thought.
At least they have to be balanced.
Okay.
So on that one, the 4-frame, you need to have at least 2
Okay.
to keep it balanced. And it can't be a deep and a medium, because again, you get that unbalanced kind of
So
feel.
I'd be better off not using the extractor this year, using it next year when they.
I use it. If you have 2 frames.
I mean, I'm excited because my friend got it for me, so like, I wanna try it, but.
The other exciting thing, after you're done,
Anyway.
you're doing your extraction, and when you're done.
Yeah.
You take that extractor outside, lay it on its side, and you'll know if there's a honey flow on.
Okay.
Okay, because if there's a honey flow on, you'll get a few bees. If there is not a honey flow or nectar flow, within 10 minutes, that thing will just be coated with bees. You come back the next day and run your hand along the inside of it, and where it was just totally covered with honey and sticky, it's like smooth and clean. They will clean
And
that
then you have an
sucker up.
extractor party, like you invite your friends and neighbors and you pour them some wine and you have them.
Well,
all
anyone's welcome to
clean up.
come use it, I don't even know how to put it together, so for real.
That's the old manual extractor. You're just sitting there cranking and spinning and,
How long do you spin it for each side?
yes. It depends on the extractor. With a tangential, which is the one where here's the center here, you do that. With the manual one, I would do it for 30 to 40 seconds and then pull it out, spin it around, do it another 30, 40 seconds, pull it out. Actually, on the first pull out, I'm looking to see where I didn't cut. I'll go back and I'll cut all those, turn it around, spin it out, do it again. So I'm turning it 4 times.
So you only spin it for 30 seconds, 40
30,
You'll
30,
feel
45
it,
seconds.
you'll know the day, you'll know
I don't,
exactly.
I didn't get one, a manual one, I did get a regular one, I spin it for.
Well, with the rate, so there's 2 ways, there's radial and there's tangential.
I have the one that's far left.
If they look radial like spokes on a wheel, then you have to spin that for 10 or 15 minutes to get that out of there.
When they're tangential, man, they just.
Depends on the temperature.
The other thing that makes a difference is the temperature. With speed, yes, but more important is the temperature. If you're spinning out honey and it's 75 degrees, you're going to spin a lot longer than if it's 90.
You also have to make sure that the honey is being forced out rather than, in other words, the way those cells are made, they go down.
Yeah,
So if you have that going in backwards, it's gonna push the honey in instead of.
Be there all
yeah,
day.
you put the ear on that end. So if that's reversed, you could be spinning all day and still, that's
Stay in
a
there.
6-pound frame still.
I think you have to also cut that capping off too.
Yeah, we recommend
that for a long time.
And I will also say that there are some methods where you take a roller that has little pins in it, and
That's what I do.
yeah, that does not, to me, does not work as well as using the fork and really cut the cappings off. Because with that little pinhole, the honey has to come through that little tiny hole, so that will take a lot longer for the honey to come out.
And not all frames are the same way. So when you start to spin, especially electric, it'll start doing this. Start it low, let it balance out, and balance it
Yeah.
out. Both of it different. I'm gonna-
And you might have to pull a frame, and like I said, I go through the second time and I do that second cover.
I like the fact that if I don't get all the honey out, I put it back on the hive and they're gonna take it out.
Yes,
So it's not wasted.
not wasted, yeah, absolutely, it's never a waste.
You got
Yeah.
one question?
If I'm going to be pulling some frames out on a weekly basis, and I don't have enough, what's the best way to store them while I'm waiting? To have enough to put in?
I have a freezer, I have a refrigerator out in the garage that has a freezer compartment. I've taken a Sawzall and cut part of the door, so the door, the top door is like this wide, it has a little slot for whatever went into I cut that whole thing off. And so the frames fit perfectly right into the freezer. So I just pulled out 30 frames out of that regular top of the freezer. So I always just slam them right in the freezer because I'm, like you said, I don't want to
How
extract.
long do you have to
3
let it warm
frames.
up
Yeah.
before?
Yeah, and so you take, I have the totes, the black plastic totes with a little gizmo that I built inside, basically a hive body, and I can put them in, throw them out in the sun, and within less than 24 hours, they're hot and ready to extract.
I also use the old like igloo coolers. They don't fit perfectly with what you're doing, but they get used ones.
Uh-huh.
And I put them all in there, close them up, put a strap on them, and then put them away. And I put them out in the sun for a few minutes.
So the only problem with that is if you've got hive beetles or
Yeah.
wax moth larvae in those frames that you're putting off to the side, that's the reason I like to freeze them, because that will kill anything. If they're alive and you've got those honey frames in there, they will start to multiply. And you could come back, a week later, open up that cooler and go, ooh.
Yeah, I try
Doesn't
to
smell it.
extract within at most 72 hours, 48 to 72 hours. Like if I'll pull frames, I'll leave them like covered in a box in the basement for 48 or 72 hours and generally feel okay.
Yeah.
But there's beetles and wax moth in every hive. So if you've left some eggs on those honey frames and you leave them in the basement for longer than 72 hours, you may come back and have a mess. Yeah, but I generally find 72 hours is usually okay to do that, assuming that you're not having an active infestation going on when you pull your frame.
So
But
that's
it
how
always
they
extracts best if you always extracts best if you extract and if you pull and extract on the same day. That's
Yeah.
ideal because it's warm, it spins out really quick. You get the frames right back on the hive and you're done.
Yeah.
So that's always ideal.
So is it legitimate to extract honey from frames that have larvae in it? Yes, so it is or isn't?
I wouldn't.
According to the Pennsylvania state guidelines, the law, no.
I wouldn't.
If it's got larvae in it, you're not supposed to extract the honey out of it. Now, have I been known to go in and see, there's a patch of drone larvae in the middle of my, and cut all that out and then extract? I might have done that once or in the past, but I really don't do that anymore. I used to like 5 years ago. Yes, sir.
And how would you identify if you had 2 frames and one of them was made by the bees, it's honey, the other one's sugar water? How can you tell the difference from looking at the frames?
Well,
That's
first,
the first one.
if you're feeding and it's sugar water, you leave it all for the bees. You're not going to pull anything because you're not going to, other than it's like, wow, this really tastes like sugar water, but it could also be black locust. You know, because some of that really light nectar that's coming in right now is, I've had people tell me, oh, that's just sugar water. That's not, you know, it's like, no, that's black locust. I haven't fed my bees since the winter.
But how do you know whether they, you know, as you get going in the spring, if there was a little sugar water
You don't,
left in
You
there?
don't.
you don't.
But you know what you fed them. You know when you fed them. You know when you fed them sugar water. You know that maybe you put on a feeder in September, October. If you come out of winter with, 50 pounds of honey, how much of that is actually honey? You have to go back and look how much you fed and how much they took. So if I put on 50 pounds of feed in October, and you're looking at 50 pounds of honey in April, I would say some of that's probably sugar water. Is it bad? No, it's not going to hurt anything. But is it truly honey? Yeah, that's arguable. All right, Paul.
I was just gonna say, sometimes in the winter, you get a dead out.
Oh, yeah.
In December, you have 50 pounds of honey in your hive, and that's all sugar water. You have to wait till the spring, spin it all out. Let's fill those hives up again, and then throw that stuff away or put it in. Just throw that stuff in.
You can either throw it away, you can put it out for them to feed on.
It's up to you.
They just put it back.
Yeah, well, but they'll tend to feed on it more than they will store it.
Yeah.
Especially this year when we had all that it got nice and warm and it got cold again. I had put out a lot of feed. I pulled off of hives, and it was mostly fondant that I was pulling out. And they're feeding on the month. Are they stacking that into the sugar, into the honey frames? No, because they're eating. Yeah. All right. Another extraction method is comb honey. So you're doing this cut comb. Lots of different ways of doing cut comb. There's the hog half combs. There's the Ross rounds. This is the more traditional method where you actually have basically a blank frame, a foundationless frame, and they've drawn all that honeycomb in and filled it with honey, and now it's being cut out, and they're using a wire over there in the far left to cut the comb into little squares, and it gets, you can do it the newfangled way with a cookie press. Square cookie. Okay, now they're doing some kind of a cutter, or you can just use a knife, just cut it. Yeah.
Or do they need like a little bit of starter frame to get started, or will they just do that on a blank frame?
Yes, some bees are a little more
Slow, like mine?
some bees are slower than others.
Special, I need a special.
Special bees, Donna.
Got it, special bee.
Donna's waiting 4 years for her bees.
They were great, now they just suck.
Donna, you can buy thin comb.
Thin comb.
Thin comb for making cut.
Oh, yeah, right, okay.
You just attach a half inch at the top.
Yeah.
And draw the rest out.
Thank you, because I should ask anybody know, because I've never done it. I've always used the half hog and the Ross rounds.
Ike sells the thin comb.
It's
thin
just wax,
foundation.
right?
It's wax, but it's like you can see through it.
Is
No
it
wire.
edible?
Yeah,
Like a
no,
okay.
it's as edible as wax.
Okay.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure
it's
the
beeswax.
source.
Okay.
And then, yeah,
I've taken just a regular honey frame, sectioned it into 3 sections without any wax, and they build it right in, no problem. And then you just cut those squares right out.
right. Again, it depends on the bees. I've put frames like that in there, come back 4 or 5 weeks later, this time of year, and they're still untouched. Some bees.
Seems my bees
Like
made it down to
something
your yard.
And then you've got the flow hive, which is, just as a note, I know there's a couple of people here that are anybody using flow hives? Howard's got some. Okay, well, it's if you listen to what the marketing says, this is the easy way of doing beekeeping and honey production. And, basically what it is this plastic frame. And when you turn the key, it shifts every other half cell down, and which cuts the wax, and it all goes down in the middle, down and out the spout. The problem is it doesn't change the fact that you have to manage your bees. You have to get that flow hive off. You have to go into the brood box and do standard management techniques. I need to check for mites. I need to make sure that I've got a queen. Is she laying well? Do I have diseases? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the marketing makes it seem like you don't have to do that. That's just patently false. But it is nice to go into a hive, pop it out, and this is another thing they don't tell you in the marketing materials, is you actually need to pull those honey frames out before you just turn the key and start extracting, because you don't know if they're capped. And so here I am pulling out a frame, and it's mostly capped. It's probably 50% capped. It's not completely capped. But this was done several years ago, and I was getting ready to go on a trip for 3 or 4 weeks, and I needed to get it out then. And that was because the previous year it was like, oh, look at all of this nectar that's in the frame. I'll just, when I get back, I'll just extract then. I came back and what was like 30 or 40 pounds of honey in there was gone. Every frame was dry. It moved it all down. It emptied out. It's like, oh, that sucks. So then I put in the key, I turn it, and you see the honey is pouring out of the tube right into the bottle. This was I think my second year using them, and what I've done since is I take the top of the mason jar, drill a hole in it, and I take a plastic tube, and put it down through that hole in the mason jar, so that I don't get bees coming to harvest what I'm now pouring out their hive. So it keeps it a little, because that first year it's not bad here, but you can see there's like one bee that's flying around. I was constantly pulling bees out of the honey, and it's like, this is just stupid. So
What does a flow hive cost roughly?
too much. You could get one used, about $150. Get a real flow hive, I think it's like $500.
Just for one box?
For the one box for the honey super, you do the whole thing, I think it's like $800. You can buy the knockoffs. The problem with the knockoffs is you don't know what kind of plastic they're using. And I know the materials are cheap. I've heard, you've got one, right?
I just got a knockoff frames.
Yeah. How much?
They were $15 a frame.
$15 a frame. But you just don't really know what you're going to get. So that's the flow hive. And
It's a box of plastic. It's tough to get the bees to use them.
yeah, what I had to do was what I would do is I'd take my roller of wax and I'd wax the tops of those flow hive frames, and it just entice them to come mess with it. But it'd be like, get it on there, not too, balancing act, not too much, not too little. You don't want to block all the cells, and then they get attracted to it. I also have done put a super on top with the flow hive underneath, and then rotate them every week. Just kind of getting them to, oh wow, something's changed, and now they're moving up and down through it, and maybe stopping and taking a look. Just do it nice. It is not as easy as they make it seem, but it is a good way for some folks in Australia to get pretty rich. They've done really, really well. That's honestly the reason I'm in beekeeping, is because 10 years ago my wife said, "Hey, we're going to get into beekeeping." Okay, and we're gonna be a founding member of this flow hive thing. And so we did all that, and she's been in her bee suit 3 times in 10 years. So there you go.
But
Thank you
Carla
all.
is a treasured member of the plant crew.
Yes, treasured member of the plant crew, exactly.